I asked our guest Shane Hallam to pound the table for someone before the draft. Shane, who you pounded the table for?
I'm pounding the table for Texas running back Roschon Johnston. I think Roschon is going to be much better than a lot of the running backs in this class, despite being the backup to Bijan. He's going to be a lead running back in the NFL and great for your fantasy team one day.
I love it. I love it. You heard it here first. Go get you some Roschon Johnston. Now let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Most Accurate Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Niles. With me is my excellent co-host, as always, Jen Akins. Jen, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm thrilled with Shane's pound the table, because if you remember last week in our rookie running back spectacular, that was my one guy that I talked about that no one's talking about because, Robinson is getting all the hype. So I'm excited to hear that. I'm excited to get the draft over with. You know how I feel about the draft. It's some people live for it, and it is like my least favorite part of the fantasy football yearly cycle. So I am thrilled to get that underway, and I'm thrilled to have Shane here because then I can just sit here and smile and not really give any input tonight and just let him roll with everything. Brandon, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I love the draft, but I will be honest, I stopped doing draft content, and now I know less about this draft than I've ever known about any draft since I was a kid. So it's true. I barely know anything about this year's draft. I'm not going to get out of the second round before I start seeing names that I don't really know a lot about it. That's rare for me. But luckily we have Shane here. I'm very excited. He's going to be here to join us to talk quarterback, tight end, wide receiver draft prospects. You can find Shane's work on Draft Countdown. Listen to his podcast, The Devy Marketplace. Absolutely follow him on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam for excellent draft nuggets. Not only during the draft, but also super insightful on the undrafted free agent signings. It's great the days following. Shane, you're my favorite Twitter follow in regard to draft. One of my favorite Twitter follows in general. Thank you so much for coming on. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back. Thanks for the high praise. It's always a pleasure to be with both of you, and especially draft week, man. This is I'm hyped up. I'm ready as well. I'm kind of ready for it to be over as well. It's like, Christmas Eve here, and let's just get this thing going.
Well, we're excited to be able to know where to draft these players, right? Because it's all speculation at this point. Getting those best ball circles over on Underdog after the draft goes down and figure out where these guys go. Shane, everybody check out Shane's mock up on Draft Countdown right now. 7-round mock. Also, your player blurbs don't get as much play, Shane, but they're excellent. Your player blurbs up there as well. Check those out. I wanted to ask you real quick, what do you think the likelihood is of the Cardinals trading down? Lots of question marks in Houston. Cardinals definitely need some of the defensive talent that's there. If gun to your head, do the Cardinals pick at 3?
I think gun to my head, I say they do. I think it's close to 50-50, probably 55-45. I think that they stay, more likely that they stay there. Defense, I've also heard offensive tackle, that they might be interested in Paris Johnson from Ohio State. So I think they're not going to want to move down too far. I think it might be tough for a team to move up unless it's maybe the Raiders, 7, someone like that.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask Bijan Robinson, you've still got him. That's the other Texas. We'll just call him the other Texas running back.
Yeah,
right. You have him 8th to Atlanta, unless you updated it this morning. You've still got him 8th to Atlanta. Thank you for that fantasy dream scenario. I just wanted to say. I think that's where we all want him to land. We'll get to that later. We'll get to stuff like that later. Last week we talked running backs with Justin Edwards. This week we're going to talk, like I said, quarterback, tight end, receiver. Let's hit quarterback first. Shane, how many first-round quarterbacks do we have this year? Because it seems like I hear 4 or 5, but most years when you hear about that, it doesn't actually end up being 4 or 5. So how many do you think we actually see off the board on day one?
I do think we get 4. I think the 5th, Hendon Hooker, the quarterback out of Tennessee, has been getting this push. It's going to continue all week into the first round. I just don't think a team's going to sit there and say, hey, I'm going to use my first round pick on the 25-year-old with the ACL injury from a gimmicky offense. I like Hendon Hooker. I think he could be great. He'll go early second, but I think we get the big 4, and that's it. I think we all need to learn our lesson from last year. We were trying to push Malik Willis and Matt Corral and whoever else into the first round, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I look back now and I see all those Malik Willis top 10 picks, and it looks very funny now. It looks very funny a year later. So how many of them do you have ranked as first-round talents? Because I know that's not always the same thing. So
I only have two. So I have Bryce Young, the quarterback at Alabama, and I actually have Ohio State CJ Stroud slightly above him. I think they're both top 3 talents in this draft for me. I think both are phenomenal quarterback prospects and recruits. Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida, and Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky. I have more of a second-round grade on, maybe willing in the right situation to take them late first, but they're going to go much higher than I have them graded.
Yeah, obviously we're seeing them top 10. You have them mocked highly in the first round as well. You do have Stroud and Young neck and neck. Tell me a little bit about these two quarterbacks, what you love about, obviously you love both of them, what you love about them and what you love specifically about Stroud over Young.
I think they're similar in a lot of ways. Just the ball placement that both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud has is exceptional. We saw this year with Bryce Young under pressure, big time game situations. You know, he has stepped up to the plate. I think that makes him an elite potential prospect. Plus, you have some of the athleticism. I think Stroud just has a lot of those fundamentals down pat, the footwork, the arm. Every pass looks the same, whether it's a 5-yard slant or he's throwing the ball on a 9 route 40 yards down the field. Like his arm motion and his footwork is all the same. And that compartmentalizing, it just makes it so much easier to hit your target. I think both those guys are good at it. They have good arm strength. You know, they kind of have the full package. I think Bryce Young's frame is a little concerning. It's like the one thing that knocks him down. It might not be an issue. I don't think it'll be an issue in the NFL, but 5'10", he played under 200 pounds. He got hurt this past year. Yeah, it's a little bit of a concern. I think I would take Stroud's kind of size. I think Stroud has more athleticism than we give him credit for, but you know, I think you're picking out of 2 great quarterbacks if you get that choice.
That makes sense to me. So the size, we did see Kyler Murray's been okay, even though size was kind of the knock on him. So let's see if
I think Kyler Murray's been okay for us fantasy people, but I think in the real NFL, they're not exactly too thrilled with Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
It's true. There's definitely a lot going on with Kyler Murray. There's just a lot happening there. So assuming these two players, Young and Stroud, assuming they land in spots to start, is a landing spot when you're looking at a dynasty fantasy approach, because I know you, like me, enjoy dynasty and even deeper leagues than that. But when you're looking at these two, will landing spot be the difference, or are you going to pretty much prefer Stroud regardless?
I think landing spot will have an effect. Honestly, a lot might depend on where Stroud goes in the draft. You know, if he goes 2 or he goes 4, then I'll feel a little more comfortable with him. I do think Carolina, they're going to take Bryce Young first overall. I think that's kind of in the books at this point. And, you know, that kind of conviction maybe might sell me on him. So it's still razor thin. I'm not a big like landing spot makes the difference, but I have both these guys pretty close. So that could be the tiebreaker here. And I'll probably, with as many dynasty leagues I'm in, try to have a good amount of both.
I'm a little off show sheet here, but dynasty superflex formats, are Stroud and Young, are they number 1, number 2, number 3, but with Bijan, or is there something different you want to throw at us?
Well, I think Anthony Richardson is interesting at the 102 because of that size and athleticism. Like, I don't know if Anthony Richardson's going to be a good quarterback. I don't think he will be, but I don't need him to be for fantasy. I just need him to run through and over guys and for touchdowns, right? Like I can sell him for a lot if that happens in year 1 or year 2. I'm a value dynasty player. So if I think a guy's going to increase his value, I think Anthony Richardson, as long as he goes in the top 12, then I'm willing to spend maybe that 102 on him and take the upside. And 103, 104 be Young and Stroud, and Bijan's still 101 for me.
Sure. So talking Richardson, let's assume he and Will Levis, who's also super athletic and has some rushing ability. Let's say they both assume in grooming spots, you know, like Indianapolis behind Minshew for a year, Seattle behind Geno for a year, places like that. Where do you look at them, Dynasty Superflex? Do you still prefer Rich? Obviously, you prefer Richardson there, but where are you looking at Levis?
Yeah, I think Will Levis is tough because depending on the spot, I think you could make an argument for 105. You could say, look, this is once again a top 12 quarterback. If he goes to a place like Seattle, if they spend the 5th pick, or if the Texans take him at 2, it's like you know he's the future. And like you said, if there's someone in front of him that starts, whether it's Geno Smith or Davis Mills or whoever, that's fine with me. I'm fine waiting on those quarterbacks. I think it's such a gold asset in the Superflex leagues. Right now, I have Levis the 107. I think I'd probably take Jaxon Smith-Njigba, the receiver from Ohio State, and Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back from Alabama, over him. But the draft could change that. So in the 105 to 107 mold for Levis, and I think Richardson is in that 102 to 104 area.
Where do you want Richardson to land? Like, where's a good fantasy spot for him?
Like, I would love him in Indianapolis because kind of what you said. I think he could sit for a little bit. You have the run game. Like, there's some, and we saw how good Jalen Hurts was in that change straight-in offense. I think Anthony Richardson could do similar things. I don't think he's as talented as Jalen Hurts, but at least running the football, we know that offense is open to it. That's good for me. I'd be more scared in a place like Tennessee or something like that, where I'm like, this seems more conservative, and they're trying to swing for the fences. So that's probably how that will work out for me. If Richardson goes 4, he's going to be super intriguing.
Is Tennessee going to give up on Malik Willis after 1 year?
Yeah.
I
think they've already given up on Malik Willis. I think it's already in the bag. I don't even know if they wanted to take him. I feel like they were like, he shouldn't be here. I guess we got to take him. And then
got to give him a whirl.
Crap. Yeah.
I've been drafting a lot of Ryan Tannehill in like best ball at the end because nobody wants him, but you're like, he's going to play at least, a decent chunk. I mean, I don't think they're rushing to get Willis out there anytime soon, if at all. So.
Yeah, we'll see. There's rumors of him getting moved. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, out of value at this point, somebody who can do a little bit of action with his legs. Let's talk, since you're a Devy guy, let's talk Caleb Williams a little bit. I know it's a little late in the game for Devy, Caleb Williams, but look into next year Dynasty stuff. Is he going to be your top prospect on the board for next year? And where would he rank in this year's class?
I think Caleb Williams is easily the top quarterback on the board, top player on the board for the 2024 NFL draft, because he has the 5-star pedigree like Bryce Young did, but also has shown the ability to run, throw down the field. I mean, man, he's so crisp with his arm work, and he's so good. Yeah, I think he would be easily number 1 in this class. I think that the Bears could have gotten even more for that number 1 pick if they wanted to. If Caleb Williams was sitting here, ultimately, he's going to be a game changer for whoever gets the number 1 overall pick next year.
I got a pretty bad team in Superflex. Should I be punting this year, the quarterback this year, and going after Caleb Williams next year?
Like, I think if you got a pretty bad team, you might want to move those running backs, get Barron at running back, and find your way into that number 1 pick. It'll be worth it, because I think fantasy-wise, too, he has the legs and athletic ability, and right now, I think you need that in fantasy to feel really confident about a high floor. So I think Caleb Williams, people are going to be trading a lot to get him in fantasy and the real NFL draft if it comes down to it.
I like it. How does he rank to Trevor Lawrence? Because I know you loved Trevor Lawrence coming out, so as a prospect.
Trevor Lawrence is my highest-rated quarterback prospect ever, and I've been doing this since 2004. Caleb's not there yet, but we'll see how this year goes. If this year goes really well, my challenge my Trevor Lawrence grade. So in May, I'm going to post my kind of top 10 historic grades by position of what they've been. And Caleb Williams might challenge that. He has that kind of talent.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing that, Shane. That's awesome. Any favorite prospects we haven't mentioned? We've kind of talked the top 5 a little bit. We touched on Hendon Hooker. Anybody we didn't bring up at the quarterback that you want to bring up?
Jake Haener from Fresno State, I think, has a shot to sneak into the 3rd round. Just really tough, productive, accurate. I don't know if he's going to be this, great fantasy quarterback, but say a team like Detroit drafts him behind Jared Goff, right? Could be a fit if they want to develop him and let him kind of manage an offense with a lot of weapons. I think Haener could be worth a fantasy look if he gets a starting job due to injury or something. But I also like Clayton Tune out of Houston. I think he has a live arm. He's pretty raw, but has some of that high-end talent and production. So he's a name to look for. Day 3, might get drafted, and I think both those guys will stick around the league for a while.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing where these quarterbacks land. Let's move on to the tight end position.
Let's move on to nobody's favorite position. Tight end. I actually used to really like tight end, but it's just been such a wasteland over the last couple of years that it's tough to get excited about it. I will say, though, that I was doing a little research for something else today. In the last 2 years, we've actually had some decent rookie tight end production. Like So it hasn't been, I think we're moving maybe towards that. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. But this year is a stronger tight end class than at least, we've seen, in a while. It's a little deeper, some names that could possibly contribute right away. How many, of the guys in this class do you see contributing, right away?
Like you said, I think rookie tight ends are starting to produce a little bit more. Teams are trusting them, and I think part of it is because the position's such a barren wasteland in the NFL. So many teams need a tight end. I think we're going to see, maybe 3 or 4 tight ends that could give immediate value. Obviously, the top 2 that I think are pretty lock first-round picks, Michael Mayer at Notre Dame and Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. I think those are guys that could step in day one, have the experience to be able to step in and get a lot of receptions coming their way, maybe some touchdowns. But I also think some of the upside tight ends, Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State, could be an immediate contributor. And, I think we could even see Darnell Washington out of Georgia, if he gets to the right spot, maybe help out with touchdowns and give you a 2-touchdown game here and there. So I think we're going to see this rookie tight end group. I'm interested to see in Dynasty in these rookie drafts. I think they're going to be under-drafted in a lot of rookie drafts because people are scared of investing in the tight end, but this is the year to do it.
You mentioned Darnell Washington. It's no secret. Anyone that listens to the pod, anyone that reads my work, I am a UGA homer through and through. I'm excited about Darnell Washington. I know you mentioned him a little bit, but coming from a Devi, Dynasty perspective, which I don't play, but I'm aware. How high do you see Brock Bowers? Because I love the guy. I wish he was coming out this year. That would be fantastic if we could draft him now. I'd be all over it. But how are you valuing him in the Devi formats, and where do you see him as a fantasy asset, next year when he comes out?
I love Brock Bowers. He's so good. He's in tight end premium Superflex. He's my number 4 Devi player entirely. So I have 2 quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers. I would take him over any running back in Devi right now. One of my favorite tweets I've ever made, and I'm sticking to it, is that Brock Bowers is going to be what we wanted Kyle Pitts to be. That's what Brock Bowers will be. Because he's not just a receiver, right? He's running the football. He's running these reverses. He has the athleticism. I think he has the physicality. I think Brock Bowers is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, I'm going to be super bummed to not be able to watch him in a red and black uniform, unless, of course, he goes to the Falcons or something, which wouldn't make sense. But I will miss watching him in the SEC every Saturday. But I'm excited to see him, what he does in the NFL. So, from a fantasy perspective, what is your favorite, pairing of a landing spot per se? Like you said, Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid. Where do you see these guys going? Where do you want them to go? Where do you think, as fantasy managers, would behoove all of us if they went there?
There's a lot of nice spots because a lot of teams don't have a tight end. I mean, I think the Green Bay Packers is the most glaring spot hole. Obviously Aaron Rodgers now being traded. Yeah, maybe that hurts it a little bit, but then moving up to 13, I think Michael Mayer makes a lot of sense and can essentially be, the 1B in that passing game to Christian Watson or to the running backs. I think he could be really good. I definitely like the Chargers as a landing spot. Mm-hmm. I think we thought maybe they would invest in Dalton Schultz, but we saw how Schultz did well in that offense last year for Dallas. You don't need a super athlete to catch a lot of passes. And you have Justin Herbert as your quarterback and receivers to get hurt all the time. I would love if they drafted Dalton Kincaid in the first round. I think they're definitely very intriguing. And then I think Dallas and Cincinnati. I think Cowboys and Bengals both have a giant hole. Jake Ferguson's fine, but I think they're going to draft one. And Cincinnati as well. I mean, Irv Smith's going to last 2 games. Let's be real. And whoever they draft is going to step in there. Drew Sample was a wasted pick by them. Even Buffalo's brought in the most. I think they're tied for the most tight end visits up with Green Bay. They brought in a lot of tight ends, and so I can see that too. I think. Look at those day 2 tight ends. There's going to be a lot that are going to contribute almost immediately just out of pure need.
I would like to see Detroit would be fun. I don't think it'll happen because I think they have other things that they need, but I think Detroit would be fun if they got, a really good rookie. And speaking of, you said the day 2 guys, is there anyone that we have not mentioned that you feel like is worth mentioning?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I'll kind of go my guy and maybe my biggest fantasy crush in this tight end class is Tucker Kraft, the tight end out of South Dakota State. I mean, he is good size, 90+ percentile athlete at the position, super tough, good blocker. He'll catch the ball. He'll run you over. Had some injuries this year that knocked him down, or I think he'd be a firm round 2 selection, probably round 3, early round 4. But I looked at my pre-draft notes, and his, the notes I have for him line up exactly with the notes I had for Travis Kelce when he was coming out. Injuries kind of hamper the athleticism on the field, but he's a better athlete than he is, plays really smart, finds the hole in the zone, can do some things after the catch. But the injury problem was an issue. I think Tucker Kraft's that guy. But I like Sam Laporta out of Iowa as kind of another receiver. I think Luke Schoonmaker out of Michigan is highly undervalued in the fantasy community right now. He's an athlete that can play. Brenton Strange from Penn State. This tight end class is 10-11 deep. It is worth investing in.
We're seeing a lot more 2 tight end systems out there too, which makes it fun to see where these guys land. Sometimes 2 tight ends have actual fantasy value. It's been fun.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I just need more tight ends to have fantasy value. I feel good.
We all do, because it's like you get, every year we get hyped up, and then there's like 3 that are good and the rest suck, and then we start over the next year. So it would be nice if this new crop would actually give us, tight end 4 through 12 to actually produce.
I'm praying it happens here.
All right, let's talk wide receivers. I want to devote a good amount of time to the wide receiver section here. We've been having a lot of instant impact fantasy receivers as rookies over the last few years. Even though last year the class wasn't as touted as it was the previous 2 years, we still had Garrett Wilson came out and was a quality fantasy receiver at times. Chris Olave had a really good season. We had good rookie years. Is this another strong class of rookie receivers that we can hope for some immediate production?
I think it's a good class. I don't think it ended up being as great as we were hoping that it would be, just with certain circumstances this year with certain players. I mean, we're probably still going to get 4 first-round receivers, 3 to 4, I would say, and you're going to have probably another 3 to 4 go in that beginning to mid-second round range. Like, we're going to have a lot of players that are there. I think for fantasy, when you look at these receivers, you're looking at this guy's 175 pounds. This guy's 182 pounds. And it's like, oh, that doesn't feel quite as good, right? It doesn't feel like we can get that dominant wide receiver 1 out of this group that we want. And I think that's what hinders it a little bit from a fantasy perspective. But look, I mean, I think a guy like Hollywood Brown, for example, was left behind in rookie drafts because he was the first receiver off the board, but he's super small. Like, I think teams, if they're going to draft these guys early, they're going to try to build them into the offense to get some volume. So I'm a little higher on the group as a whole than I think the general consensus, but I definitely understand the trepidation of the class. And we don't have a Jamar Chase. Who knows if we're actually going to get a top 12 fantasy receiver out of this group.
So among your wide receivers, you do have Jaxon Smith-Njigba from Ohio State as your top receiver. How big is the gap between him and your number 2 receiver, Quentin Johnston?
It's pretty big at this point. I think it's widened here a little bit in the offseason. JSN, I think had he played this year, he had the hamstring injury, tried a little bit, really couldn't play. Emeka Egbuka took his spot as the slot role for Ohio State. I think we would be talking about him as a top 10 pick just because he gets open really well. I mean, JSN has that agility. His agility scores were off the charts. He's so explosive off the line, super difficult to cover. You remember the Rose Bowl against Utah 2 years back. Like, he can dominate. And I think we just didn't see it for a year. So it's like, can he dominate? He's a slot receiver, whatever. But we've seen a guy like Justin Jefferson, slot receiver in college, have that ability to go outside. I think JSN can go outside. I think it's going to depend on the system and scheme that he gets drafted into. But I feel a lot more comfortable with him than I do Quentin Johnston. Like Quentin Johnston could bust. I don't think JSN's going to be a bust. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 for my fantasy team, and I'll trot him out in my flex spot. Worst case scenario, Quentin Johnston. We might be looking at you're looking at another player that just busts out, the Jonathan Baldwins of the world going back. You get scared of that kind of player.
I love the Jonathan Baldwin reference. I enjoy those references. I like that shit. You went back.
Well, that's the first one that comes to my head. That's pretty bad. But
I went Laquan Treadwell, but I like that. So, Smith-Njigba, you said Justin Jefferson. That's what's interesting to me. I've only watched a little bit of film, but I'm starting to knock Smith-Njigba for the same things I knocked Justin Jefferson for, and that's what scares me about avoiding him. So I think I'm just going to have to draft Smith-Njigba this year.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough when a player only does this one thing in college. Like that's not going to fly. Like JSN can't be who he was in college in the NFL and be, a top 10 fantasy producing receiver. It just can't happen. He could be Deontay Johnson. Like that's what you're hoping for. But I think there is faith that he is much better than that. I think even going back to watching him in high school where he played outside, he was leaping over guys and making catches. It's like, it's high school, but I've seen him do it. He has that ability. So it's going to be a good debate. I think he's pretty firmly the 102 in one quarterback leagues. Like I think you have to take him 102 just because of the chasm between him and the rest of this receiver class.
There a spot you're hoping he lands?
I mean, look, if I can just dream draft, the Texans take CJ Stroud at 2 and JSN at 12, then I'm in. Yeah. Like, give me the Shanahan offense with Jaxon Smith-Njigba playing, that Deebo Samuel role and CJ Stroud throwing the ball. I think I'd be very comfortable with that.
That sounds like a blast. That's what now I want that to be my dynasty pick. That's what I want. I want to take Stroud and Smith-Njigba. You talked about Quentin Johnston as your number 2. He bigger player, a yak monster. Is he kind of the only X receiver in this draft? Because like you said, they're all kind of small. So your thoughts on Quentin Johnston, kind of his potential going in?
I think he's the only X receiver, at least till mid-late second round of the NFL draft. What's going to be interesting is, does that make a difference in his draft stock? I think it's worth noting. If he goes in the top 20, then that tells me that a team's like, hey, he can be the X, he can play it. We feel comfortable with that. If he falls to 30, 31, whatever, then it's like teams were scared away by the only big X receiver. Quentin Johnston doesn't play like your typical X, like you said. He's a yak guy, catching the ball behind the line, bubble screen passes, taking some of those short kind of slants and trying to get ahead. He's not great at the jump balls. He's not great at playing through contact and being able to catch the football that way. And those are things you can improve. I think we've seen a lot of players kind of quote play small and end up in the NFL playing much bigger. But Quentin Johnston just hasn't done it because of the TSU offense. So I'm intrigued. I'll swing for the fences with him in a couple leagues, but I'm not going to be, oversaturated with Quentin Johnston because of that downside fear.
Sure. Number 3 on a lot of people's boards on Jordan Addison for USC. I find him to be a really hard grade to me. Tell me what you think of Jordan Addison, what his ceiling is in the NFL, because he looks like a guy who should be able to be fast and get downfield, but then you don't always see it. And I just can't figure out what to make of him.
He's tough. He is a tough grade. 173 pounds. He dominated at Pitt, 18 years old, in the ACC, and then went to USC and continued to do the same type of things, obviously with a better quarterback. Though having Kenny Pickett and Caleb Williams, 2 first-round picks isn't too bad. I think Addison, when you watch him and you see the route running, you see the precise footwork, you see the hand-eye coordination to really track the ball in the air and do what he has to do to come down with it. I feel comfortable with that. What's he going to do against press at that? I don't know. My prospect comp, so I comp guys as similar to guys coming into the league, because I scout before they come in. That's what I know. Is Jeremy Maclin back in 2009 from Missouri, who a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, he was really fast. He's faster than Addison. But you go back and look at his speed numbers, his 40 time, you're like, oh, he wasn't that fast, right? The route running creates the speed for Addison. And I think that's where the separation can come. So I think his ceiling's limited, but I do think he has a high floor. I think he's going to be a good player.
I didn't know what to do with Macklin either. So.
Yeah, right, which is fair. He was very similar in that vein. You're like, I don't know. So we'll see.
So you mentioned a little bit, we mentioned a landing spot for JSN. What about the other guys? Do you have any favorites landing spots that you see some of these, top-ish wide receivers going?
Look, I would love to get Quentin Johnston to the Giants. Can we just get them a real X receiver with some size? And I think I would be in that offense that seemed to work well. I think they have enough slot guys to fill up 17 slots on the field, but we don't have anyone for the outside. So, I would like that fit. I think New England is interesting because I don't trust Bill Belichick to scout receivers, and B, I don't know if any he just can't do it. Just stop. If he drafts one this year,
the history's there. Like, we just can't.
He drafts Zay Flowers at 14. Then I'm
like, don't do that.
Let's wait for my final mock draft, Brandon. We'll plug him in there. But they actually have an offensive coordinator that's coached offense, which is good, and I think Mac Jones is fine. Like, I think it would be an interesting spot if someone's good enough to ascend. I think that's interesting. So, and honestly, the Vikings is one that I like too. I don't know if they're going to draft a receiver early, but I think getting someone to play that Adam Thielen role, KJ Osborne can keep doing his thing. I'd be happy there too.
Sounds good. So we've got three guys that are kind of all grouped together, right? You got Jalen Hyatt, Zay Flowers, as you mentioned, Josh Downs. You actually have them in that order that I just mentioned. How do you differentiate these three guys, and why do you like Hyatt the best?
It's funny because they all have similar frames and builds. I think they all play very differently, which makes it tough. It's kind of your flavor. Like, I think Jalen Hyatt, we saw him dominate Alabama. He has the deep speed without the 40 time. The manipulation of corners with his eyes, his feet, and his hips is very good. People talk, speed, whatever. Now, he doesn't let you know where he's going to go, and then he goes where you don't think he's going to go, and that's how he gets open deep so much. I think it's an underrated skill that fantasy players kind of shy away from. That's interesting to me. We'll see how it translates. I think Zay Flowers is going to be the earliest drafted. I think he's a sleeper to be the first receiver off the board, maybe even ahead of JSN in the draft. Like a team like the Patriots that really like him, want that kind of quick twitch, explosive ability behind the line that gets up to speed really quick, and played in a really crappy offense with a crappy quarterback and made things happen. That's usually a good thing. I think Josh Downs is your typical slot receiver. I mean, he gets open in the slot. He has those nice slants inside, keeps his speed through the catch and continues going. So I think Downs could be more of a volume player, get more of a PPR kind of monster. I think Hyatt, you're looking for the kind of the best ball format and get some of those big plays, and maybe he can develop into something more. I think Flowers is a little bit of, it's going to depend on the offense and how they use him. So it becomes tough. They've kind of been falling down my rookie draft boards, especially the running back class that you talked about already. So good. It's like, I'd rather just take a shot on these running backs, I think, than the next tier of receivers.
So as a Steelers fan, any truth to the rumor that Jalen Hyatt is actually just Nate Washington re-entering the draft? I'm just curious.
Look, that's a good comp too. I'm sad I didn't come up with that, Brandon. That's a good one, man. Nate Washington can do one thing, and that's it. That sounds like Jalen Hyatt in Tennessee. So hopefully if someone's drafting Hyatt in the top 50, they don't get Nate Washington out of it.
Guys, I was watching, like I said, I haven't done my homework like I usually do this year, but early on in the process, like early in the college football season, Rashee Rice from SMU and Kayshon Boutte from LSU, those guys were kind of highly touted. Now they're being projected as mid-rounders. Are they sleeper potential guys, or is there a reason they're dropping?
I think there's definitely sleeper potential. I think there's always potential when you have talent that's going to exceed draft capital. If you're going to take a shot on a day 3 guy, like take one that's talented. I think both those players are. And Kayshon Boutte is just, we had that great freshman year and looked like the next great LSU receiver and dealt with injuries and ineffectiveness, came in the first game this season, gave no effort on the field, just stopped trying. And you know, he had some games there, but between that and some of the off-field rumors, I think it's just really hard for a team to invest in a guy that both Rashee Rice and Kayshon Boutte don't play special teams. I can't draft. If I'm not going to draft around 3, it's going to be tough to draft highly. I think Rice is a little bit more of limited route tree. He kind of did a couple routes, really. That's all he ran, and has some off-field, effort kind of concerns, work ethic concerns. Those are the guys to try for, though. When you start looking at guys that get drafted round 5, round 6, round 7 in the NFL draft, take a shot. We saw it happen with Stephon Diggs. You can sometimes hit that gold with a player who was a good recruit, was a good player, but had, something that knocked him down the board that's not field related. If they get it back, then they're still talented, and that talent's still there. So worth a shot.
Any other sleepers that we should look at? I mean, we'll talk about like favorite prospects, but somebody specifically day 3 that we should kind of keep an eye on landing spot for.
I really like Tyler Scott, a receiver from Cincinnati. I think is an interesting one. And maybe he sneaks into day 2, maybe not. But
he was our pound the table last week from
Justin Edwards loves Tyler Scott.
Yeah, look, I'm in. I'm with Justin here because I see that Deontay Johnson type of mold of being able to be so quick off the line that it's Tyler Scott's just tough to cover. And I think if he had any semblance of good quarterback play at Cincinnati last year, he would have had a lot more production than he had. So he's kind of my guy. If he gets in a landing spot where that slot position's open, I think just open the doors and draft Tyler Scott late.
Any other prospects that we haven't mentioned? Receiver-wise?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's a couple. Jaden Reed, the receiver from Michigan State, I think has kind of become a fantasy darling a little bit. He passes a lot of the analytics and advanced metrics testing because Michigan State didn't throw the football a lot. And when they did, they threw to him or his teammate Keon Coleman, who's a prospect next year. Reed is a little more bulky, 190 pounds. It's just sad to say that's more bulky in this class, but it is, and he has some versatility to him. One of my favorites, I think he's going to get drafted super late in the draft, is Andre Yeshivas, receiver from Princeton. He was a 99.8% athlete, track star, 6'3", 205. And I watched him at Princeton 2 years ago. He literally is like a track guy. He just ran like a track player on the field. And you watch him this past year, and he really started to get it and started to understand football. So if you have like some of those deep leagues, taxi squads, whatever, that's the kind of player I like to draft and stash. So he's definitely a guy I'll have a lot of.
I'm going to put you on the spot with some things I didn't put on the show sheet since we're good on time. Is that okay?
Yeah. Let's the more the merrier.
So DeAndre Hopkins, he get moved this weekend, do you think? Or you think we have to wait longer?
I think we have to wait longer. I just think there's too much with him in the contract to feel like you can get that done in a weekend. Unless the groundwork has already been laid out. And if it has, I feel like he gets moved before the draft. I won't be floored, but I'll be surprised if he's moved on draft day.
Excellent. Seattle.
I would love it like right in the middle. Like
that'd be great.
Like a random trade goes through smack in the middle of like the first or second round.
I would thoroughly enjoy that. Number 20, Seattle. Pick a number 20. No, number 5, we assume pass rusher, maybe quarterback, something like that. Number 20, is that a good receiver spot? I know you've got them taking a tackle in your mock, but is that a good receiver spot? What would you think of that if they added another receiver to that room?
I'd be really intrigued if they decide to spend the 20th pick. They've whiffed on some of those day 2 picks in the past, but I think when you're going to spend the kind of premium draft capital, I think I'd be in. Like Tyler Lockett's good. He's been great for fantasy. I don't think they view him as maybe one more year and out. And it's a team that I think needs that extra receiver help. So yeah, I'd kind of be in. I'd kind of be interested ultimately, but hopefully they get someone that's a little more talented than some of the receivers they brought in before. The Gary Jennings and that kind of group.
Excellent. You talked about running backs, like that. We're not doing running backs today, but like I said, since we have a little bit more time, you talked about how you'd be stocking up on running backs in dynasty drafts rather than taking some of these later receivers. Who are some of your targets there after Bijan Robinson? And obviously, we know you like Roschon Johnston as well.
Yeah, how much time do we have left? We can run down like the next 10 running backs. I think they're all pretty good. Obviously Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, I think, is the favorite to be the third running back off the board after Bijan and Gibbs. And he gives you more of that 215-pound, run between the tackles, but still have some speed and receiving ability. So I think people are going to be in on him. And it wouldn't overly surprise me if we get some people that try to be a little bit cute and move him up past Jahmyr Gibbs or past JSN if it's a good landing spot. I do really like Devin Achane, the running back from Texas A&M, who I think fantasy players are going to be allergic to in the rookie drafts because he's 188 pounds. And that'll tell me they haven't watched Devin Achane play, because he carried the load in the SEC this year. He ran between the tackles. He is tough. Like, he will run you over. It doesn't always happen. He's 188 pounds. He runs in that 320 pounder. Like, he's not taking him down. But I mean, a linebacker comes down to tackle him and he picks up extra yardage. Really good receiver, track athlete star. I've heard Miami's really interested in that second round range. And I mean, that would be the dream spot for him. So I'm definitely intrigued by him. I think Kendre Miller out of TCU is going to go very high. I think it's just a really deep, good running back class. I feel really comfortable and confident with my top 11 running backs being contributors in the NFL in some way.
Let's talk about number 9 on that board, because I love this kid. Israel Abanikanda from Pittsburgh. This kid just athleticism off the charts and keeps his legs moving him. I love this kid. Is my love warranted this year, or do I need to watch some more?
I think it is. I mean, I think he's raw. He wasn't even supposed to start for Pitt. He was not the starter coming into the year. Rodney Hammond was and got hurt the first game, and then Izzy just ran away with the job despite having production the year before. I think it's warranted. I think his draft capital is going to tell us a lot. Like, if a team takes him in the third round, then you really have to be in. Like, the raw tool sets there, like you said, he's electric, he's explosive, the outside rushing ability, and he takes really nice rush angles when he gets to that second level to avoid direct contact, and oftentimes taking those safeties back on their heels, and they have trouble with their hips and turning around. I think he does a really good job manipulating the third level of a defense too. But he's definitely raw. Like, trying to get him to run between the tackles, he really needed a hole. And that it can be worrisome. There's a lot of offensive lines in the NFL that can't make the hole for you. And if he gets stuck in one of those spots, like, it could be trouble, but put him in one of those outside zone or even inside zone schemes where just make the one cut and go. I feel a lot more comfortable with him. So he's going to be a little draft capital team dependent for me, but the upside at 215 when he can run like he does is there.
So Miami to the moon, then, if Miami grabs him, then with that one cut scheme. Yeah, that's there's a few teams out there like Miami that are kind of a mess running back wise, and if they draft somebody, we'll just kind of be scratching our heads on who we're going to go after. Is Miami one of those teams? You talked about Achane maybe going there. I don't know what I would do with Achane if he ends up in Miami. I'd be excited from a football perspective, but fantasy wise, is that just a mess, or do you think a rookie can come over and take over that backfield?
I think a rookie can come and take over that backfield. Like, I don't know. I'm not threatened by Raheem Mostert or
I was going to say, let's be real. Like, either Mostert or Wilson are going to get hurt within the first couple games anyway. So then the door's
you're not wrong.
The door's going to open there.
Yeah, I think if they invest that second or third round pick, I'm in. Like, if it gets later than that, they only have 4 picks in the draft, it's like, well, I don't know. We have the Dalvin Cook rumors. Maybe they don't draft a running back at all. And I think there are some spots. I think some teams are going to draft running backs that, we're not going to be maybe super happy with from a fantasy perspective, right? That happens every year. Like, I think the Rams are going to draft one fairly early, and then you're like, well, great, now you got to split with Cam Akers or whatever. You know, I think it's glaringly obvious Tampa is the most interested team in a running back rather than anyone else in this draft. They brought in almost every running back for a visit. Like, they're pairing someone with Rachaad White, however you feel about that. So I think we'll have some tough spots in there, but it's going to be interesting.
I'm going to be interested to see those veterans. You talked about Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, as well as being floated around there as maybe a Dolphins target. You don't think he gets moved?
No, I think as one guy sending one tweet just sets the world.
Oh, is that it?
That he was traded to the Eagles. And I was like, what is going on? Like, the Titans. I think Henry's sticking unless the Titans draft Bijan at 11. Then we're like, well, I guess something's happening. But no, I think Henry's gonna stay. But yeah, I mean, look, we still got Zeke to sign, and some of those older guys are gonna sign somewhere. So I feel like we always have a team or two that we expect to take a running back. Just passes on the position as well. Mm-hmm. I think this class is going to tempt teams. One of my bold predictions is that we have 10 running backs go in the top 100 picks the first 3 rounds. It's a bold take. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think we're going to get darn close.
I like that. I'm going to ask you one defensive question. I'm going to ask Jen one more question, then I'll let you go, Shane. I know you've got a heart out. Defensive wise, Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson. Which one do you like better and why?
I mean, it's easily Will Anderson for me. Like, I don't see the Tyree Wilson love that the NFL seems to see. And I get a little bit, right? Tyree Wilson is this big, long kind of base 4'3" defensive end, 270 pounds, 6'6". Like, he looks like what you want. You know, he looks like Myles Garrett. He doesn't play like Myles Garrett. Had the injury this year. And, you know, I just don't know how you pass on the guy that got 17.5 sacks in the SEC for the guy that couldn't get, you know, more than 7 in the Big 12. I think is a problem. Like, Will Anderson his bend in his first step is so good that I think he should be the first defensive player off the board. I think a team will regret taking Tyree Wilson over him if they decide to do that. Texans, Cardinals, whoever. It's a chasm for me. I just, you know, like, I have Tyree Wilson as my 3rd best edge rusher in the draft, just because I see the upside, and like, I'm not even super comfortable with that. It wouldn't surprise me if he's a bust.
Interesting. I love this. That's pretty spicy, Shane. I like that.
Yeah, so you can play that clip when he's like a Hall of Famer, but you know, that's usually how it goes.
No, he's going to be Vernon Gholston, man. You've got this down.
There we go.
Jen, I want to ask you real quick. You're always the voice of reason. I get very excited around draft time, especially the quarterbacks. I get excited. I start I start bringing rookies up my rankings in all my fantasy formats, best ball and dynasty, and even redraft. And you're my voice of reason in redraft. Will you give me a well-deserved and well-needed settle down before we sign off on this one?
Yes, I will. I'm gonna ask you to settle down and redraft. Now, best ball, draft them all. Feel free, especially in the Superflex format, which I think just closed on Underdog. So I think they're going to be launching the Best Ball Mania here right after the draft, and that's a regular format. But still, feel free to draft Young, feel free to draft Stroud, feel free to draft Anderson, whatever. In redraft, if it's a regular old home league 1 QB, no. There's 12 better quarterbacks out there currently on the NFL. You know how it is, Brandon. Very rarely a rookie quarterback, even if he starts on day one, it's just not, even Trevor Lawrence, but he had a complete, the Urban Meyer era to deal with.
But so even Burrow, even Burrow,
yeah,
you can go back to the Peyton Mannings and all that. It's not a common occurrence. So.
Right. And the guys that we're looking at right now are going to go to teams that they're not going to be in a position to put up a ton of fantasy points. So you need to throttle back a little bit, Brandon. Pull him back. You can take him in best ball all you want in rounds, 15 through 18 all day. But redraft, no. And worst comes to worst, you know how it is. You can stream them if you need to later. They'll be there.
I need that, Jen. I need this in my life. This helps me when it comes to redraft time, and I have Bryce Young way too high on my list. So,
can I say I needed that as well from Jen, because I have an FFPC draft on Wednesday night. I'm going to draft like 10 rookies, so it's going to be bad.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much, Shane, for joining us. I No BS. I genuinely love your content and genuinely appreciate you coming on. Listeners, please read Shane's mock at Draft Countdown. Check out the Devy Marketplace podcast. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, as you can see by that awesome sign behind you, Shane, which is very cool. Shane, any final thoughts or plugs before we go?
No, I appreciate having me. This is one of my favorite shows to do the week of the draft every year. It's always fun. But yeah, go to draft. I'll have a 7-round mock draft the morning of. My final big board is coming out, and we'll have that. We have a free draft guide with all my scouting reports in it. Free draft contest. You can win money. Everything's free. Just go to draftcountdown.com.
Excellent. Everybody definitely check that out. And Jen, always a pleasure. Listeners, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Jen Akins NFL and at 2guysbrandon. Thanks so much for checking us out, and have a good day.